When are we going to get started? Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Thomas, and hello. I'm a lifestyle pharmacist, and I'm also a health coach. I currently own a business and don't charge any money. I'm not sure what's going on with the revenue there. Basically, help individuals that are interested in going plant-based, and to the degree in the spectrum that they're interested in going plant-based, I help them to do that. I started the company in February. I've had about 13 clients thus far. Some of the testimonials from some of those clients you'll see on the screen in front of you in just a few minutes. Last week, my son David asked me, I heard there were 30 people at RSVP, so I was kind of excited. And he said, "So you nervous, Dad?" I said, "No, I'm not nervous. I'm very, very excited." He goes, "Well, just like you, Dad, be excited to talk in front of a bunch of people." I'm excited because of the information that I'm going to share with you today. This is information as a pharmacist, as a healthcare professional, that I had no idea about 3 or 4 years ago when I started my plant-based journey. There's many things I'm sharing with you today that I've learned in the last year and a half of studying. I'm on my 24th book of plant-based dieting, plant-based whole food, plant-based exercise, what you can do to better yourself in plant-based. And in that process, I've learned a ton that I want to share with you guys today, specifically. So why don't we go ahead and get started? First thing, my wife is actually photocopying more copies for the handouts themselves specifically, but let me tell you about what's on those copies themselves, okay? There's recipes on those copies. A lot of times people will come to me and say, I'm not interested in going through your program, which again is no cost, but I just want some recipes to be more healthy. So from that standpoint, I put some of the top recipes that I have on the copy itself. The web address is on there for those recipes, so you just go right to that web address, and you basically go right through it. It tells you exactly, and some of those are actually videos and tells you how to cook some of these meals. Some of you may be familiar with QR codes. QR codes are those funny boxes that are on that handout. If you put most phones, Android and Apple, if you put your camera over those QR codes, it'll prompt you for clicking for the web page itself. So it'll go right to that web page itself. Some of the copies, the QR codes are coming up perfectly, some of them not. I apologize. The ones that don't do have the web address on there. There's also a sheet that talks about plant-based eating resources. I want to be a resource for you, but I also want to provide you with lots of resources. There are a ton of really wonderful resources that have QR codes with every one of those. And those QR codes are larger, so they actually pick up on your camera or on your QR reader itself specifically. It goes right to the web page. So there's chefs on there that cook. There's videos of interviews from doctors. There's a whole lot of resources on there as well. And also there's information on the handout about myself, my company. I think my email address might be on there, my phone number, as well as my website. And then the last page is notes. You certainly can take notes during the presentation itself and ask questions at the end if you could as well. Just a quick note of thanks. I'd like to thank Father John for allowing me to present to the church and using the vehicle of the church to really get out in the community and help people try to be as healthy as possible. Both Kathy and Jenny, very huge with the marketing of this presentation. Very much appreciate their help. The logistics of setting this up last week, it's been a little bit overwhelming, but it's been incredibly exciting. And then thank you guys for your time. Sorry we started a little bit late. That again was intentional because I was going to try to get you those photocopies before we started, but they should be on the way for you as well specifically. So I know your time is extremely valuable. My whole goal here is in the next hour or so, I'd like to try to give you as much information as possible. So like I said before, if we could just hold the questions to the end, I'll be here as long as anybody has a question for me. If I can't get you the answer to the question, I'll get your contact information and get back to you to answer that question specifically. So I'll blow through these slides in the next hour or so. So the overview of this presentation, really it is health of America. What's going on in America with our health overall. It's pretty sad, and there's some of the trends that as I was researching for this presentation, I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't realize how bad it was actually going to be. So I talked a little bit about health in America, the first probably 10 or 15, 20 slides. And then what I get into is what I think the number one cause of the chronic diseases in America, which of course is the way we eat in general in America. Solution being a plant-based lifestyle. And then I get into some testimonials of myself, because I tell you my own personal story in this presentation. Testimonials of some folks that are famous that are online that I recommend that you study, as well as I've got some testimonials from some of my clients already getting out there with plant-based and finding some pretty good results. So health in America. So we spend $3.5 trillion every year A couple years ago it was 3.3 trillion, now it's 3.5 trillion every year, which is 5 times our federal defense budget in healthcare. It's truly not healthcare, it's really sick care. 86% of our annual healthcare costs are due to chronic diseases. America ranks 27th out of the 34 free democracies in the world in longevity, even though we spend much more than any other country in healthcare in our country. America is the most obese country in the world, and 2018 was the third year in a row where decreasing life expectancy in America. We've never had that before, and they're now saying this generation being born could be the first generation that actually doesn't live as long as the generation before it. So let's just break it down specifically where we are today with heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. But the first thing I want to get personal with you and tell you a little bit about my own story. So for the last probably 12 or 13 years, I've suffered from angina, which is chest pain, and very concerned that one day that I was going to die of a heart attack. I was going to be that guy that everybody said, oh, I just saw you so healthy. And you guys know those people. Some very prominent people in Springfield recently, unfortunately, that were really healthy and then just all of a sudden died of a heart attack. I was at the point where it's in my genes. A lot of my biomarkers were not very good. For example, my HDL is the good cholesterol, and they wanted to be raised at least 40. Mine was 19. This was after exercise as well. My lipoprotein A is a marker, a micro that they want between 24 and 27. Mine was 104. Bob Harper, who's from The Biggest Loser, a very amazing athlete, had a heart attack recently, almost died. Actually had cardiac arrest. His lipoprotein A was also very high and raised as well. So I'm thinking, I'm really concerned here, and I'm going to die, and there's nothing I can do about it. So about 3 years ago, this gentleman on the screen, Chris Weisgood, was one of my store managers when I worked at Walgreens. Retired about a year and a half ago. Chris Weisgood basically told me about him going plant-based. And I didn't know, what are you talking about, going plant-based, vegetarian? He goes, no, you actually don't eat any animal products. You really try to limit the processed foods to be more healthy. And in fact, by the way, you can reverse heart disease. This is the first time I'd ever heard this, and of course I was very intrigued. This was December the 26th, 2016. I went home, I studied it, I watched videos, I studied it some more, and by the time my wife, that was a Monday, by the time she got home from her shift, which was 10:30 at night, I sat down with her and I said, I think I'm going to do this. She goes, well, that seems pretty extreme. I'm like, well, I feel like I'm going to die because I'm having chest pain all the time. I'm very concerned about my well-being. I got no other alternatives. So I basically decided to go ahead and see what I can do to pursue this lifestyle, really not knowing what I was doing or how specifically to do that itself. Most heart attacks occur with cholesterol between 175 and 225. In fact, the average cholesterol in America is around 195 to 200, which is not good. That's the average in America, which is one of the worst diets in the world. My weight got up to 191, but when I went into this process, I was about 180, 178 to be exact. And my body mass index, my BMI was 28.2, so I was categorized as being overweight. So I was really pursuing this to say, what can I do to try to be as healthy as possible, because I got nothing else. In fact, I had a conversation with Grace Ann saying, I want to go in and just get an angiogram. I wanted to take pictures of my veins because I'm going to die and there's nothing I can do about it because the technology isn't where it needs to be so I can live. That's where my state of being was. She's like, well, that's risks. You can't just go in and pay for it, even if the insurance can't pay for it. So I felt like I was really stuck between a rock and a hard place. Some specifics, so that's my before. So I want to tell you a little bit, some statistics about heart disease itself, and at the end of the presentation, I'll give you some of my after. Heart disease statistic number one killer in America. So 40% of Americans die from heart disease. Average cholesterol in the United States, like I said, is 195 to 200. 1.25 million people have a heart attack each year. Unfortunately, 400,000 people die from it. Someone dies every 52 seconds. We've been talking, for heart disease, we've been talking about 10 minutes. It's about 11 or 12 people that die. They've already died on average from this presentation in the time that I've presented to you. 500,000 people have open heart surgery every year. Pretty radical. It costs about $75,000 to $150,000 depending on the hospital to have open heart bypass surgery. The solution to heart disease, fortunately for me, fortunately for some of you, is a whole food plant-based diet. Why do I say this? Dr. Esselstyn, a number of years ago, was a cardiac surgeon at Cleveland Clinic. He basically went to the hospital and said, I want you to give me 18 of your worst patients that basically we can't do anything else with, and they were sent home to die, if you will. The artery on the left is one of those patients, diseased artery. Of these 18 patients, 49 cardiac events they had in the previous 5 years. So they were very sick people. at year 5, one of those patients died of a cardiac arrhythmia. At year 12, there were 0 cardiac events from any of these other 17 patients for 12 years. Okay, so they went from having 49 almost dead to 17 out of 18 of them were alive. There was a second study they did as well with 200 patients, and less than 1% of those patients had a coronary event. Reason number 2, some of you may be familiar with the Ornish Program. The Ornish Program is a 9-week lifestyle program, but unfortunately you have to have a major cardiac event, something like open heart surgery or a heart attack to qualify for the Ornish Program specifically. Dean Ornish is a doctor and an amazing person who started this program that really proved that you can reverse heart disease. He did so, and so much so to say that now Medicare and many private insurance companies actually pay for it's a pretty expensive program. It's pretty intensive, 9 weeks. He showed the heart disease can be reversed, and with those 4 pillars, which are food, which is whole food, plant-based diet, exercise or movement, stress management, and love and support. So another reason that verifies to me that this works to reverse heart disease. Let's talk a little bit about diabetes. So in diabetes, there's type 1 diabetes and there's type 2 diabetes. I'm going to give you overall big picture here. I don't want to get too complicated, but with type 1 diabetes, that's the kind of diabetes that you have to use insulin because your body doesn't produce insulin for the glucose, which is in the blood, to go into the cells, which needs to happen. When your glucose doesn't go into your cells, it stays out in your blood and it ravages your blood vessels. So diabetes, as you're well aware, is a very scary thing. So in type 1, your body doesn't make insulin, you have to get insulin shots. In type 2, your body makes insulin, but your body's insulin resistant to a certain level or a certain degree. So unfortunately, the insulin your body makes isn't working nearly as well as it should, okay? Of all the diabetics, 95% of them are type 2 diabetics. 5% of them are insulin-dependent type 1 diabetic. The pathophysiology of type 2 diabetes is basically intracellular fat and fat around the liver and the pancreas. So to cure that, or to reverse that, what we want to do is we want to minimize the amount of fat that's in the cell, not heavy people necessarily, but just in general, fat around the pancreas and fat around the liver. Some statistics about diabetes type 2 to show you what's happened in the last 50 years. In 1965, there was 2.5 million people in America that had type 2 diabetes. In 1980, it was 5.5 million people. Here we are in 2019, there's 20 million people with type 2 diabetes. It's estimated there's 29 million people, but 9 million people have it and they don't even know that they have it. It's now being called the Black Death of the 21st century. So a measurement in how it's diagnosed is what's classified as a biomarker called A1C. And A1C measures the amount of glucose in your blood that's attached to your red blood cells. Remember, we want glucose to go out of the blood and into the cells themselves. So when there's more glucose in the blood, there's more glucose attaches to your red blood cells. The percentage of that glucose that's attached is what's actually measured as an A1C. So your A1C of 4.0 to 5.7 is where you want to be not be a diabetic. An A1C of 5.7 to 6.4 is pre-diabetic, and 37% of America is pre-diabetic. An A1C of over 6.5 is actually diagnosed as a diabetic, and that's typically when that patient will go in to see the doctor, have that diagnosis, and then have to start taking metformin or some medication to try to limit the amount of glucose that's in their blood. As you can see, 46%, almost 50% of Americans are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. The reason why they have a classification called pre-diabetic is because that's bad news too. Pre-diabetic isn't, oh thank goodness I'm not diabetic yet. There's a lot of bad things that happen to your body because of the amount of glucose that's in your blood, specifically. So the goal is really to be less than 5.7 on the A1C. Some complications with type 2 diabetes. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 complication. Nerve damage, neuropathy. There's 70,000 amputations, typically the toe, the foot, or the leg in America, unfortunately, because of type 2 diabetes. What happens is, because your blood, because the glucose is in the blood, the vessels are getting messed up, your nerves aren't getting nearly enough blood supply, especially in your extremities, especially in your feet. So you can get a small cut and you wouldn't even feel it. You get a small cut and you don't feel it and it gets infected. And because the blood supply is not going to it, unfortunately, it gets worse, and the infection gets worse, and then the only way that they can remove that infection is actually to amputate the toe, typically, or then half the foot, or just below the knee. There's 70,000 of those in America because of type 2 diabetes. A couple of extra sensitive vessels in our body are in our eyes and our kidneys. And when you have that extra glucose that are going around and it won't go into the cells, they really affect the kidneys and they affect the eyes. So vision loss or kidney failure is another unfortunate indication of type 2 diabetes. So it's really important to try to get that glucose into the cells. Solution for type 2 diabetes is whole food, plant-based lifestyle. So I have several examples of why I can show you this, but in the interest of time, I just chose one of the best ones that I have, and that's Mark Ramirez. Unfortunately, Mark Ramirez's mom passed away with diabetes, type 2 diabetes complications in 2002, and that was the same year that he was actually diagnosed. Went in to see his doctor, got his A1C, and it was recognized that he was in fact a diabetic, just like his mom. So he took one medication for a while, and then took two medications to try to lower his blood glucose. It continued to get worse, continued to get worse. In 2011, his A1C was 10.5. Remember, we want to be less than 5.7. So that was ravaging his blood vessels, his heart, his kidneys, his eyes. It was at that time that he heard about whole food, plant-based lifestyle. In December of 2011, sure enough, he went on whole food, plant-based lifestyle. He went strict, and we're going to talk about different spectrums that you can be if you decide to be on this. And he was off all his medications, lost the weight you can see on the screen in 2 months. His A1C went less than 5.7. So pretty dramatic results, but not necessarily uncommon. So let's talk about obesity and obesity trends in America. This one's pretty compelling. First thing I want to talk to you about is BMI. A BMI is a body mass index, which basically says, based on your height, this is what your weight should be. And most people are normally shaped, i.e. they're not big muscle builders and it's a bunch of muscle, because that's obviously doesn't really indicate for somebody's BMI that's a bodybuilder. But in general, normal people that aren't bodybuilders, they can go along this and see where they're ranking as far as being overweight, obese, normal, underweight, or extremely obese. A BMI, for example, of obesity is somebody that's 5'4", they're 30 pounds overweight, they're classified as being obese. I'm 20, normal BMI is 18.5 to 25. I'm about 22. My BMI is 22. When I started, remember, my BMI was 28, classified as overweight because that's 25 to 30. Obese is 30 to 35, and morbidly obese is over 35. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, but it really shows you what's happened in the last 30 to 35 years in America with obesity. Okay? The number I really want you to target is this number right down here. It says 10 to 14. I want you to look at that number, the number that comes up in the next several slides, all the way to the right. And you can see there were a handful of states that had 10 to 14 of their population that were not overweight, but actually were in fact obese. This is 1986. 1997, we now have 3 states that are over 20% of their population that is obese. Your 10 to 14% before is now right in the middle. That's just 11 years later. 1999, several more states are greater than 20% of the population is obese. 2001, we've got, was that Mississippi? Mississippi is now greater than 25% of their population is obese. 2001. Look at your 10 to 14. 2002, we've got 3 states, West Virginia, Mississippi, and Alabama now, 25%. 2004, we've got several states now that are 25% or greater obesity in America. 2005, we now have a new category. 3 states, Louisiana, Mississippi, West Virginia. 30%, over 30% of the population is obese. 2010, we got several more states that are over 30%. 2012, we've got a new category, but we don't have any states, fortunately. But, of course, in 2013, we've got 2 more states that are over 35%. Where's your 10 to 14? Right? So there's no states in America now that were the worst before 1986. There's no states that were the worst. Everybody is much worse. So what's happening, right? That's just a comparison of 1986 and 2013. It's pretty scary. Obesity in the world, like I said before, we are the most obese country in the world. 32.2% of the United States is obese. We're not talking about overweight. We're talking about the BMI of 30 or greater. If you just Google BMI calculator, you can put in your weight, you can put in your height, and it'll tell you where you fall in the category. The best is Korea and Japan. So some obesity complications. Heart disease, number one. Diabetes and prediabetes, again, nearly 50% of Americans. Stroke, which is a heart attack on the brain. The number 2 cause of cancer is obesity. Number 1 is smoking. Arthritis, logistically, physics, all that extra weight that person's carrying around, it's 4 extra pounds of pressure on the joints, on the hips and the knees for every 1 pound that they're overweight. I really want to talk about number 1 here, Obesity Why The Change. So 2 main culprits have brought on the obesity. And number 1 is very high caloric density foods that taste amazing, but have lots of calories and no nutritional value, and our consumption of these. Number 2 is sedentary lifestyle. And maybe we don't move as much as we used to, but there's no way that you can outrun your diet anyway. That's minor compared to number 1. So why are we eating too many calories? So this isn't a character flaw. The people that are overweight or obese, which is 70% of the population, is either overweight or obese. They're not lazy or ignorant people. This is a biological change. Okay? This is a challenge that we're having with our bodies because we've evolved over the course of the last several 100,000 years, not an environment of excess food where businesses are spitting out all this amazing tasting food with high calories. So it's a challenge our bodies have evolved this way. Why is this happening? Again, it's the food. Since 1980, we talked about not only the high caloric foods, but also the amount that we're consuming. Americans have consumed 3 times more cheese since 1980, 4 times more chips and fries. Americans consume an additional 13 pounds of oil per year, which is 52,000 calories just of the oil. But that doesn't compare to what we had before that. This is more, right? So pretty scary stuff. Surprise, surprise. The solution to obesity is absolutely, positively a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. There's one success story, or there's a couple success stories there for you. If you saw the slide that were rotating prior to the presentation, there were several other. But as far as obesity goes, Heather Goodwin, she's on the internet all over the place. It's blowing up because of what she's done. She tried several different types of diets or lifestyles, and sure enough, whole food plant-based is not only one that she's been able to do, but also been able to stick with. Lenny Muehlrath has written a book called The Plant-Based Journey. I highly recommend it. It is a phenomenal book. It did not take her, 15 years to lose the weight. Basically, it took her about 1.5 years to lose her weight, but this is just an older before picture that she has of herself. But a beautiful lady as well. So heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. Why such dramatic increases in the diseases? Surprise, surprise, it's the food. So now let's give you some good news, right? This has been a drag. All right, so there is definitely good news. So Hippocrates said 2,500 years ago, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. There is hope, and it is a whole food, plant-based diet/lifestyle. But let's go back to some more bad news. Standard American diet, which stands for SAD, which is probably very appropriate. 57% of the calories that we intake as Americans is processed foods. 32% is animal products. And 11% is what we're looking for, which is your vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, and legumes. Only 11%. So what's wrong with processed foods? So again, if we're consuming 57% of our calories from processed foods, what's the problem here? So processed foods are very high caloric density, and we'll talk about that term in just a minute. They have lots of calories, things like high fructose corn syrup, many chemicals that extend the life of the product that you can have for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, but not necessarily your life. Many processed foods have a lot of oil, and we'll get into the specifics about oil as well. And most processed foods have very little nutritional value. They're not real food. So that teenager or that adult or that elderly person or that child that grabs those Pop-Tarts or those Fruit Loops and says, I got my meal in, they're getting some calories in, but they're really not getting very good nutrition. So why eliminate oil? As I mentioned before, oil is very high in calories. There's 4,000 calories per pound of oil is. There's no nutritional value in oil. You don't get your vitamins and minerals from oil at all. You have increased inflammation when you consume oil. And it also damages your endothelial wall, which we talk about heart disease and arteries specifically. You want to keep your endothelial wall, which is your blood vessels. Oil messes with that pretty badly. What's wrong with the 32% animal products? I would say a lot, but I gave you some of the rough bullets right here. So it probably goes without saying as you have increased animal products, which could be milk, cheese, chicken, beef, salami, etc. You have increased cholesterol because all that is in animal products. You don't need cholesterol. You don't need to eat cholesterol because your body naturally makes cholesterol as it is. Also increased saturated fats. Both cholesterol and saturated fats have proven time and time again how they relate to heart disease, obesity, diabetes, cancer, stroke. There's less nutritional value in 500 calories or any number of calories compared to plants themselves specifically. And I've got a chart to show you the comparison of the nutritional value of animal products compared to plants. I'll show you that in just a minute on the slide. There's no fiber in animal products. So we really need to get fiber, and we're not getting nearly the fiber that we need, and I'll show you that slide in a minute as well. You have increased inflammation when eating meat. In 2015, the World Health Organization categorized processed meat as a level 1 carcinogen. So ham, salami, bacon, hot dogs, all the same class as cigarettes and cigarette smoking. 2015, the World Health Organization labeled red meat, beef, lamb, and pork as probable causes for cancer. This came out, actually I read this today. They showed that chicken, people say, well, I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to have chicken. Chicken and red meat are very comparable in how they help or hurt for heart disease. They're very comparable. So when you have chicken, you're still having tons of cholesterol. The best way to go is to eat plants. HCA, which is heterocyclic amines, which is the burn meat that you have when you grill, which a lot of people like that taste. That's actually a carcinogen. Things like beef, pork, fish, and chicken. And there's several others. What about these antibiotics that they're pumping into the animals? What about the hormones that the animals have that are affecting your body as well? So there's really a lot wrong with animal products and consumption of this. What's right with plants? So that 11% that we want to try to say, what can we do to get that to 15%? What can we do to get that to 25%, 65%, 85%? What's right with plants? There's no cholesterol in plants, which obviously affects heart disease. There's a lot more fiber. Plants have a ton of fiber. There's better nutrition, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals. Better weight management because of calorie density. And like I said, I've got a slide to show you that in just a minute. You have more energy when you eat plants. It edges out the animal products and the processed foods when you have a whole food plant-based diet. And there's many positive effects towards good health and preventing, reversing heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and obesity. So this is a money slide. I'm going to probably keep it on here just for a little while. So this is calorie density, and this is really where the magic happens, I guess, if you will. If you look at the horizontal line and you eat everything above that line, all of your foods, that's where you're eating a whole food plant-based lifestyle, okay? Calorie density is the measurement of the number of calories per a set amount of weight. In this situation, it's a weight of 1 pound. So vegetables, non-starchy, so celery, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce, they're about 100 calories per pound, anywhere from 75 to 150 calories per pound. Fruit, roughly about 300 calories per pound. Potato, corn, squash, oats, 400 calories per pound. Whole grains, rice, whole wheat, pasta, 500 calories per pound. And then your beans and legumes are around 600 calories per pound. So if you eat nothing but everything above that line, you're eating a whole food, plant-based lifestyle, and the weight will drop if you have the weight to lose, and things can potentially start to reverse themselves. If you go lower, if you look at avocados, which are incredibly healthy, but somebody that's interested in losing weight, I don't recommend they go too heavy on avocados initially, some of the clients that I have. And also, you can see it, they're at 750 calories per pound. And then second to last at the bottom, there's nuts, seeds, butters, and tahinis. So those are butters from nuts. Those are really healthy, but again, they're calorie dense. If your goal is to lose weight and you want to lower the number of calories that you're getting, you probably want to go easy and stuff like that in general. But all that other stuff, your processed foods, your animal products, your chocolate, your oil at the bottom, it's 4,000 calories per pound. All that, okay, is not necessarily very healthy for you specifically. You get your breads, your bagels, your wraps, etc. I put the can of black beans on here because sometimes people come to me and say, I could never do that because I'm always having to go to the store and prep all my stuff and it always goes bad. Well, there is a degree of that. There's definitely a degree of that. But also, there's some ways that there's tips and tricks and helpful hints that I can share with you that help you where you don't necessarily have to throw away your food. Or you can have shelf life that's extended because you get black beans. And I would say black beans that are not salted, that are organic, that you buy at Walmart for 61 cents a can, are incredibly healthy and low calorically dense. I would give beans that you make in the crock pot or the Instant Pot a 10 out of 10 in health. I would give these a 10 out of 10 as well, especially since there's no salt. There are some, if you get regular with salt, it's got 20 times the amount of salt in it than regular black beans without salt, okay? Another tip is frozen foods. Frozen foods are typically picked when they're ripe, and so when they thaw and you eat them, they taste amazing, and as you're well aware, you can keep frozen fruits in the freezer for a long time. Another one would be frozen vegetables. And we have that at my house all the time between the different smoothies or the meals that I'll just pop some corn in the microwave that's frozen. 5 minutes later, we've got corn added to our meal as a side. Very, very healthy and convenient. Here's another slide about calorie density. I like this graphic one. So it shows you all the way to the left 400 calories of oil and what that takes up in your stomach. So there's receptors in your stomach. The three main receptors that say, I'm full and I'm going to stop eating are the weight of the food, the volume of the food, and the nutrients of the food. And as you can see, when we talked about oil, look at the 400 calories. There's hardly any space that's taken in your stomach. There's no nutrients in there at all, and there's no weight to it as well. Chicken takes a little bit more calories. The calorie density is a little bit less, but the nutrient value, like I said, we'll talk about in just a minute, but doesn't take up very much room in your stomach. And the next one is, of course, 400 calories of spinach, eggplant, and beans. Your stomach is pretty much full. Okay. The last one on calorie density is which is more filling. A pint of ice cream or a half a gallon of raw salad, 3 ears of corn, 2 baked potatoes, and a pound of cherries. Those have exactly the same amount of calories. Obviously, your nutritional value is probably going to be better on the bottom half of that. Not saying you wouldn't enjoy that ice cream, though. All right, so a comparison of 500 calorie comparison. So we've got plant versus animal. So I'm just going to give you guys a minute just to kind of look at the comparison there, and I'm going to point a few things out. If you see the bottom there, if you have equal parts of tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes, and you put that together and it makes 500 calories, you set that down. You have equal parts of beef, pork, chicken, whole milk, 500 calories, you put that on the counter as well. And then you can compare the nutritional value. The top 3 lines is what I really want you to focus on. The first one is cholesterol. As I mentioned before, plants have no cholesterol at all. However, in the 500 calories of animal-based foods, there's 137 milligrams of cholesterol in that animal product. Fat. Obviously, it's low-fat, plant-based, 4 grams of fat, and you have 36 grams of fat, some of which is saturated fat, the unhealthy fat for your body. And then protein. A lot of people say, well, I didn't get my protein. What about my protein? What am I going to do about my protein? How do you get your protein? You're going to see in just a minute, there's not going to be any problem at all if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet to get your amount of protein that you want. In fact, in this comparison, it's about equal. You've got 33 grams of protein in the 500 calories of plants, and you've got 34 grams of protein in the 500 calories of animal product. So I put together the day in the life, and I wanted to compare fiber, protein, and cost. And in that sense, before we get started, I want to tell you about fiber itself. As I mentioned before, we're not getting nearly the amount of fiber that we need to be healthy. In fact, 2% of Americans eat the amount of fiber to be healthy, which is 30 grams. We're getting about 15 grams a day, on average, Americans are. Why is fiber important? Many, many reasons. Some of those are, it keeps things moving, excretes toxins. Your LDL is your bad cholesterol that you want to be low. Being less than 100 on your LDL is good. Being less than 90 is great. Being less than 80 is fantastic. It helps to get rid of that. And as well as the toxins of like heavy metals. Helps to prevent colon cancer, getting plenty of fiber. Helps to keep you at a healthy weight because it gives you the satiety. It takes up that room in your stomach. And it lowers your risks for diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some types of cancer. So where am I going to get my protein? As I mentioned before, you will not have any problem at all getting your protein. I'll show you some numbers to prove that in just a minute. Let's have a little fun first. This guy is Nimai Delgado. Nimai Delgado has never eaten meat. You can't really tell by looking at him, but he's never eaten meat. Nimai Delgado has been a vegetarian since a baby, his entire life, but had eggs and dairy until 2015. And for animal rights reasons, he decided to stop eating eggs and dairy. And a funny thing happened when he went to the gym. He didn't look like that before 2015. His recovery when he was having workouts was so much easier and so much better that he was able to push himself so much harder that what he did is he built significant muscle after he dropped all the animal products in his diet. He's actually won several bodybuilding titles. Was on the cover of Muscle Fitness a couple years ago. What about cost? So Jay-Z and Beyonce, some of you guys might know who they are. They're actually pushing plant-based. They'll call it a vegan lifestyle, which is, I'm not talking about vegan style, although it's similar, but they'll push that for the animals, they'll push that for the environment, they'll push that for health, which I think is really wonderful. But on their threads, when they do this on Twitter and Facebook, etc., many people will respond back, well, I'd do that if you paid for it because I can't afford that. In reality, the cost, in my opinion, is about the same. I've been grocery shopping now at our house for the last year and a half, and I can vouch for that. So the day in the life. So what I did was I basically looked at what my clients are eating on this lifestyle and what I typically eat on this lifestyle, and this is pretty much what I have at least once or twice a week, this actual meal, this day. And I wanted to compare what kind of fiber am I getting in a whole food plant-based lifestyle? What kind of protein am I getting? And how much is this costing me? So for breakfast, and I think my kids, my wife can probably verify this, most day I have a huge bowl of oatmeal with a lot of strawberries and bananas and raisins and blueberries, and quite frankly, it's kind of pricey right now. Lunch, I usually throw down a bunch of lettuce in a bowl or a plate, throw a bunch of brown rice on it, throw some cherry tomatoes on there, carrots, and I'm good to go for my lunch. Dinner, I usually have pinto bean soup once or twice a week for dinner, and sometimes for lunch as well, and brown rice. And then let's say for this particular day, I decided to have a banana in the morning, and then a snack, I got hungry in the afternoon, I had an apple, okay? So what does my fiber look like? So these are all real numbers based on the quantities that I eat or talking to my clients what they eat. So for breakfast, I've got 19 grams of fiber that I've consumed. Remember, what the average American is 15 grams. So I'm not even to 8:30 in the morning, and I've already got most Americans eating fiber. So I'm pretty excited about that. 19 grams of fiber with that oatmeal. Lots of water, by the way, with the oatmeal. Lunch, spinach, brown rice, cherry tomatoes, and carrots. I've got 8.4 grams of fiber. For dinner, pinto bean soup and brown rice, 34.5 grams of fiber. And then my apple, snack, and banana, 7.5 grams of fiber. Recommended daily allowance for the fiber is 6.9 grams of fiber. And I got almost 70 grams of fiber. And the recommended is at least 30. So let's just say things are moving along pretty well. Protein, day in the life. So breakfast, all that oatmeal with fruit, I got 16.9 grams of fiber. Lunch, 9.5 grams of protein. And dinner, I've got 35.8 grams of protein. Snack, 3 grams of protein. Recommended daily allowance for 5'10", male, 56 grams of protein a day. Females, about 46 grams of protein a day. This particular day, I've got 65.1 grams of protein. There is absolutely no problem with eating whole food plant-based and you being deficient in protein. How about cost? So this is a little bit extreme. I will say that I did cheat on this one because I do love the pinto bean soup, and it just happens to be what I call a quadruple whammy, which I'll get to in just a minute. But my breakfast, like I said, it's kind of pricey. You know, I could probably buy a nice bowl of sugary cereal for $3.24, but it's very healthy. Lunch, $3.05. My pinto bean soup is 67 cents, which I've got a quadruple whammy on that one. And my snacks, they're about 40 cents for an apple and 40 cents for a banana. My total cost for the day is $7.76. But even if I double my cost, which I'm not doubling my cost, it's still pretty reasonable. So what's the quadruple whammy? So some of your recipes, not all of them, but some of your recipes, and what I want to do is kind of put together a pamphlet or a book with a bunch of quadruple whammy recipes. And that is, it's easy to make, it's inexpensive, it's incredibly healthy, and of course, it has to be delicious. That pinto bean soup, which is from Joe, one of my clients, and my brother-in-law, is phenomenal. So, talk a little bit about health span versus lifespan. We're all going to die anyway, and some people are like, I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life. Well, you have every right to do that. I do appreciate you guys being here to learn about this. Hopefully you want to learn more than just about what's going on with health in America. This is not just about adding years to your life. However, there's evidence base that says it does add about 8 to 10 years to your life. Many results show that. but it's also the quality of your life. Think about disability. Think about neighbors. Think about family members. Many of my clients have been nurses or pharmacists, and they tell me the stories about the people that they're helping and waiting on. It's very, very sad, and you guys know about that as well. So this could, there's not a cure-all necessarily, but this could significantly minimize those disabling years. Think about yourself in 20, 30, 40 years. Also, aren't my genes my destiny? Isn't this just the way it's supposed to be, and this is the lot I got? I don't believe that. I really don't believe that based on the results that I've seen, the evidence that I've read, and also for myself. And I'll show you my after in just a minute here. But again, heart disease, my uncles, they all died of heart attack or had open heart surgery in their 40s and 50s, my great uncles, on my mom's side of the family. So another thing that was concerning to me as well. I don't believe you're just genes, your destiny. This is not me, but it could have been me 2.5 years ago when I started this lifestyle. Because I did not know too much about what I was doing. All I knew I was going to be eating a lot of lettuce. So I don't recommend that because it didn't go so well with me for a while, which my wife can attest to. So what it is not, obviously, is eating a bunch of rabbit food. That first line, you got the lettuce and the carrots and the tomatoes for calorie density. It's not about that. That's part of it, obviously, but there's so much more to it. As you saw the pictures before the presentation started. So what am I supposed to eat? Here are some examples. There's many. Most of these I've cooked for my family, but some of them I just took pictures on the internet as well. So whole wheat waffles, oatmeal, there's the oatmeal again, oatmeal and fruit, blueberry pancakes for breakfast. Lunch, we got a hearty salad. There's the pinto bean soup, Cajun beans and rice, incredibly healthy. Dinner, pasta marinara, that's the whole wheat pasta marinara. Jackfruit barbecue. Anybody here familiar with jackfruit? Is that ring a little bit? Okay, good. That is actually a fruit. That is not meat, which is amazing. And that is one that my son David actually likes to eat. We're about 50-50 at home with David, so. But hey, I'll take it. I'll take 50. Here's another one, whole food plant-based veggie wraps, whole food plant-based bowls, tomato bean soup with avocado. This food is really, really good. I can assure you that. Asian stir fry. We have desserts as well. There's several pictures that I can show you with desserts, but I don't want to go too heavy with the desserts. But cherry ice cream. And basically what an ice cream is, if you take frozen bananas and you put them in a food processor or a blender, you add a little bit of plant-based milk, it actually tastes just like soft-serve ice cream. You add some cherries to it. You add some strawberries, the picture to your right. You add some peanuts to it. Add some peanut butter flavor. So there's a ton. As far as resources go on your handouts, there's a whole lot of QR codes that you have as far as resources go. These are just a few that I picked online. I haven't actually looked at these, but there's hundreds of resources, very different than it was just 5 years ago in this lifestyle. Plant-based cookbooks, plant-based websites, plant-based doctors, plant-based chefs. So where on the spectrum will you be? So really, for this specific slide, all I really want to share with you is, it's your choice. You can say, you know what, this is concerning to me, and I've got some things I really want to take care of health-wise, or whatever reason you want, and you go all the way on the spectrum, which is pretty much what I've done. I definitely have some cheat days, not very many, but I would say on that spectrum, instead of being 100%, I'm probably about 95%. My wife's probably about 80 to 85% of that 11% itself specifically. So I feel pretty good about that, and I'll show you the reason why in just a minute. But this is something that you choose. With my clients, when I talk to them about whole food plant-based, and then actually the program that I provide for free, they choose where they want to be on the spectrum. I have clients that say, you know what, every Friday night I'm going to go out to have seafood pasta, because that's what I want to do, and I love seafood pasta, and I realize that may not be the greatest for my health, but all the other days I'm eating whole food plant-based, and I'm very, very healthy. That's totally fine. That's their choice, and that's their decision. You decide. But again, where you are in the degree of that spectrum, and the decisions you make, and the actions you take, can affect your outcomes and your results. Here's what I would say is probably the biggest difference. It's not the protein. It's just not the most convenient thing, right? You can see the picture on the left there of somebody going through the drive-thru at one of our, I don't know which drive-thru that is, but I'm guessing there's probably not a lot of lettuce in that bag. On the right, it's not me, I'm not a chef, but I don't have a professional chef at home, unfortunately, either. But it's not always convenient, and every meal isn't a prep like this, like the quadruple whammy. I said it was easy. The actual time to prep that entire meal, that pinto bean delight, is about 20 minutes. It's 5 minutes in the morning to throw in a crock pot, and it's 15 minutes to chop up the vegetables in the afternoon. You're pretty much done. So it's just not as convenient, but I think that's the biggest difference to give you transparency about this lifestyle. Some people would say that only eating plants seems a bit extreme, but as I talk to you about some of the detriment that people suffer with their health and their concerns with amputations, cracking your chest open heart surgery, etc., pretty scary, I would say that would actually be extreme. So whole food, plant-based. Here's some suggestions that I have for you guys if you're interested in pursuing this lifestyle. Educate yourself first and foremost. First thing I did, that gentleman Chris, he gave me one of the books, How Not to Die, which lists the top 15 ways that Americans are dying and how whole food, plant-based can help and aid 13 of the 15 of those ways. Things like diabetes, heart disease, stomach cancer, etc. So educate yourself. There's plenty of documentaries available. There's lots of groups online. I can be a resource and help you as well. Plan for it. Like I mentioned before, planning is part of this. This is not something you typically say, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm going to start my whole food plant-based without a plan. Okay, you definitely need to plan. Know your why. My clients, I work with them on what's called a why card, where I ask them to identify their top 1, 2, 5 reasons why they would want to pursue this lifestyle. And I ask them to read it in the first 30 to 60 days, twice a day, just to remind them specifically of why this is important to them. And some of it could be they want to lose weight. It's whatever is personal to that individual. Like I said, some of my clients have been nurses and they share with me, I'm doing home health, and quite frankly, I see my why when I help these patients that have had open heart surgery, or it's really, really sad what's going on, so they're reminded day in and day out in their jobs. Recruit support. Tell your friends and family that you love and care about and they care about you, about what you want to do to pursue this lifestyle, and ask for their help and their support. Get a health coach, an accountability partner, somebody that you can confide in, trust, and talk to about your journey and the challenges that you're having, as well as some of the wins that you're having as well. That's something that I provide for in my company. Take action, learn, and adapt. I went to talk to Chris, so I talked to him on the 26th, 2016, and I went back and talked to him on the 29th. And I sat down with him, we went back to the break room, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to dip my toe in the pool here, right? Because I was reading all this stuff about people going to make fun of me, which happens anyway. So I was like, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to really pursue this. I think I'm just going to start a little bit. And he had already gone full blown in November, the month prior, and he said, Mike, just go for it. You're going to learn, you're going to adapt, you're going to make mistakes, which, like I said, especially with lots of lettuce, I made lots of mistakes. And you're going to do fine, but just go for it and see what happens, instead of trying to continually notch it up. And it's for whoever and whatever they decide. Some of my clients want to start slow, that's totally fine. Some of my clients are concerned about their health, and they go full boat, and that's wonderful as well. Again, ideas of where to start. Use transition foods like meat-like items. Some of you might be familiar with the term the Impossible Burger. Can I see a show of hands? A few of you? Okay. So Impossible Burger is made by a company that has absolutely no animal products. It is very unhealthy, but it is a nice transition. They sell it now at Burger King in Springfield. It tastes amazing, but it has a lot of saturated fats. And actually, my clients were like, yeah, I went ahead and had a cheat meal and I tried the Impossible Burger. It was amazing, but my stomach was sick for the next 3 hours, right? So it's not very healthy. It's got a lot of saturated fats in it. It's got a lot of oil in it. However, it may be a nice transition as you work your way to say, well, I'm going to try to transition away from meat as much as possible. Start lunch and dinner with a salad. What if you, that 11% we talked about before, what if you got that to 15 to 18 to 25% because you're now having a salad for your lunch, or in the beginning of your lunch, and then for your dinner as well. It's going to edge out some of those other bad products or unhealthy products. Lock into a routine. This is the one that I've done. Lock into a routine of having the same breakfast every morning. For me, it's pretty much oatmeal and fruit. Something incredibly healthy. Typically, my clients, they've got breakfast and lunch taken care of on their own, whether that's at work, whether that's at home. It's the dinner that works with the monkey wrench sometime with the rest of the family. Try meatless Mondays. That would be a way that, 1/7, you're going to get your percentage about 11% that way by just going on Mondays and say, we're not going to have meat for a while, and we're going to see how that goes. Just an idea. So is this sustainable? So when I explain to my clients about my program, I typically have is this sustainable? And I've got a picture of the Biggest Loser there. And I talk about how the Biggest Loser doesn't have a reunion show. And the reason why they don't have a reunion show is, unfortunately, many of those people, bless their hearts, who lost an amazing amount of weight, it wasn't sustainable. They went, 90 days, 60 days, or whatever it was, where they worked out 8 to 10 hours a day. And they had somebody that was supporting them either by yelling at them or coaching them or putting their arm around them. They were eating very little food and drinking lots of water. I mean, that's amazing, and you can have amazing health by doing that. But then what happens? They go home. Real life happens. They have to get a job. They can't work out 8 to 10 hours a day. That's not sustainable. This lifestyle, in my opinion, is very sustainable because you have identified what your why is, and the food tastes great. This is not about counting calories. This is not about, I can't wait till I get to September because then I can get off this diet and go back to my real world stuff here. That's not what this is about. This is about identifying what makes sense for you and going for it in the capacity of eating as many whole food, plant-based as possible. Your palate adapts. The food tastes amazing. This is about striving for better health and enjoying the foods specifically. Every one of my clients so far, and I know this is probably as I continue to get more clients, has basically stated that they're good and they're not going to get off this lifestyle because it's very sustainable. My company name is WLS Coaching, which stands for Weight Loss Sustainability Coaching. So I put the name itself, specifically sustainability, into the title because I think that's incredibly important. So the first 3 testimonials are 2 people that are online and then my own personal testimonial I've got. This is plant-based Gabriel. So my family knows how much I love plant-based Gabriel. He was a long snapper. He's about 27, 28 years old today. He was a long snapper about 5 years ago for Nebraska Cornhuskers. Started, was potentially going to go to the NFL someday. Was an amazing athlete. Obviously, he was a big boy. And unfortunately, lifting weights, he broke his back. Unfortunately, got an injury, and he could not exercise. He never could play football again, and he was unfortunately over 100 pounds overweight. He found out about the whole food, plant-based lifestyle, lost over 100 pounds without exercising. In my program, when you started, I asked you to do the same amount of exercise, especially for the 30 to 60 days that you're currently doing. So if you don't do any exercise, I don't recommend you start exercising if you're trying to change habits and behaviors to this process. That's what he's able to do. So what did he do then? He lost those 100 pounds. He went to go live with his parents who were becoming very sick with diabetes and heart disease and cooked for them for 6 to 9 months. Talk about how much character and integrity. He's also started his own website called plantbasedgabriel.com. It is one of your QR codes on there. Highly recommend him because his food tastes great and they're so simple. Before this whole process and he broke his back, the most he did was basically peanut butter and jelly on toast. That's how much he cooked. That's pretty much how much I cooked about a year and a half ago as well. So phenomenal gentleman. Obviously his before and after pictures are pretty inspiring. Some of you guys know this guy, Ben from Penn & Teller. He wrote a book called Presto, kind of a crude book, but hilarious, of course, because he is funny as well. Magician, lost 110 pounds on a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. This is my after, fortunately. So my total cholesterol was 173. Like I said, it was creeping up between 175 and 225. Most people have heart attacks at that range. I was extremely nervous. The first rating I got was 161. The next one was 139. And in March, I was very happy to report that I was 128 total cholesterol. So I want to talk a little bit about heart attack proof. Heart attack proof is a term that Dr. Esselstyn coined, I believe, I've heard him talk about it, is to try to get your total cholesterol less than 150. Framingham, Massachusetts, there's a Framingham study, some of you may have heard about it. They started in about 1948 with about 5,000 people, and all they really measured was what these 5,000 people did with their diet and how it affected their heart disease or not, their cardiovascular health. Started in 1948, 2002, they hit the 3rd generation of those individuals, so they have all this data. And nobody in the Framingham study that has a cholesterol less than 150 has ever had a heart attack. So Dr. Esselstyn has coined that to be heart attack proof. So that's why for me, my goal is just to continually be under 150. My LDL cholesterol went from 124 to 82. So again, you want that to be less than 100. Ideally, less than 90 is great. My weight went from 178 to 149. I was 153 today. Got tremendous energy, but the most important thing for me is my peace of mind. Remember, I went for about 10 or 11 years where I was always having chest pain, concerned, I'm going to die of a heart attack, I'm going to be one of those guys, and there I go. I don't feel that way anymore. I don't have the chest pain, fortunately, but overall, in general, very, very much peace of mind is my biggest benefit, I believe. So here's some of my clients. So I'm studying all this stuff online, and this is really great, and this is going to be awesome. Now I'm going to be a guinea pig, and I'm going to try it myself, and I started getting some good results. So in February, actually started last fall, I started talking to friends and family to see about anybody that's interested in potentially going this route. Started with my sister and my brother-in-law, we added some more friends, and I've had up to about 11, 12 clients thus far. And some of those clients are up here. So what I did is I talked to them about the possibility of some of the results that they got. Can I talk a little bit about your results? And everyone said yes, and they actually told me what to say. So this is Tina, who's a member of this church. She lost 22 pounds in 60 days. She said, I've got more energy, I have more confidence, I have no more counting calories, no more going through periods of starving myself on this lifestyle. You're never supposed to be hungry. Again, that's why it's sustainable. That's one of the reasons why it's sustainable. No more cravings. She feels much better, and she's educated to make healthier choices. That's Tina. This is Lynn. This is Tina's husband. He lost 34 pounds in 97 days. He had a total cholesterol of 151, which is pretty good, but he was taking 40 milligrams of a statin, anti-cholesterol lipidemia medication. Here we are in May of 2019. His cholesterol is 156, which is still excellent, taking no cholesterol medication. And the good news is, unfortunately, that type of medication he was taking, a statin, increases your chances of getting type 2 diabetes by 30%. So the good news is he doesn't have to take that medication anymore. His blood pressure without medication was 135 over 90, borderline high, went to 118 over 80 normal in 90 days. This is my brother-in-law, Joe. He's the one that invented the pinto beans diet. If we ever make a lot of money, I promise I'll share some of that money with him. He lost just under 20 pounds in 90 days. He's got more energy. He said he's got better mental focus. His cholesterol has been lowered, and his A1C went from 7.5 to 6.5, 7.0 to 6.5 in 90 days. So he's well on his way to eliminating diabetes. Very excited about that. And this is Andrea. Andrea lost 21 pounds in 90 days. She's got more energy, less bloating and fatigue after eating. Her kids are trying new foods and making healthier choices. She's got 3 little ones. Total cholesterol went from 254 to 160 in 90 days. And Andrea's LDL cholesterol is also under 90, went from 148 to 87 in 90 days. So pretty exciting. Last few slides, and then I'll wrap it up and have you guys ask any questions. A few cautions. High blood pressure. If you decide, you go home and you say, I'm going full boat, I'm starting tomorrow, and you go for it, that's awesome. However, be careful if you're taking medication for your blood pressure, because it literally works so good that in 2 or 3 weeks, there's potential that with your medication, your blood pressure is going to drop and you're going to pass out. And that's not a joke. Okay, so just want to caution you that. I also recommend that anybody taking medication or seeing a doctor to let your doctor know that you're going in this lifestyle. That they're going to talk you out of it, but it would be nice to just let them know, give them a heads up. I recommend that to all my clients. Diabetes medication, the same thing. So if you're taking metformin, you're a diabetic, and you're taking metformin, you're a type 2 diabetic, the chances that this will work for you in 2 or 3 weeks, if you go full boat, is pretty significant, and you can have low hypoglycemia, low glucose levels in your blood, which can get pretty scary. So what you want to do is you want to be monitoring your blood pressure several times a day, as well as your blood glucose, which you should be doing as a diabetic anyway. Also, vitamin B12. This is the only supplement that you should be taking when you're eating this way, because basically the sanitation system, we clean our vegetables and our food very well. You should not be eating this way without taking vitamin B12. Now, it does take several months / years for you to run out of B12 if you don't do that. But I basically take a vitamin B12 1,000 micrograms a day. It's recommended you take 2,500 micrograms once a week for vitamin B12, just to be on the safe side. Again, just a little bit about my company. I've got my business cards spread out throughout this. It's got my email address on there to contact me for later if you'd like. It's got I think it's got my website on there, my phone number and contact information as well. My email address again is, my web address is wlscoaching.net, and my phone number is on the screen. And again, my philosophy is on this presentation is that you have this information, and of course you decide what you want to do with it. I'm hoping that I didn't waste too much of your time, but I think it's pretty valuable information as it comes to your health specifically. And the ways that I could potentially help support my program itself specifically, if anybody wants to learn more about my program, you can contact me. Recipes, resources, which you have on I've got other resources besides that, and of course encouragement. So what is your health worth? So we're going to go to fancy land and just pretend that yesterday you just bought this $1 million racehorse. My first question for you is, what are you going to feed this racehorse? What is your health worth, and what are you feeding yourself? All right. What are you feeding yourself? Change your plate, change your fate. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you do that, this does work. It works significantly. It's worked in my life as well as the lives of my clients. With that, I'd open up for any questions that you guys have. Yes, ma'am.
So I assume, I like salad, but I like dressing. I assume you're not eating any dressing?
No, I have dressing. I have dressing that I can either make or I order online. That is oil-free. They also have some stores that have it as well specifically. Sometimes I put vinegar on there, but yeah, definitely dressing. It's just not, doesn't have oil in it, and it doesn't have animal products in it. Yes, sir?
What is your take on olive oil?
Olive oil?
I hear so much that it is
Sure.
very healthy.
Absolutely. So my take on olive oil is you should eliminate all oil, including olive oil itself specifically. My opinion is the Mediterranean diet, which is very heavy, and the fruits and vegetables and olive oil, a lot of those people were real healthy because they were consuming large amounts of fruits and vegetables as well. So again, what I said before, the oil is an inflammation effect, and it really messes with the endothelial wall, the blood vessels in the body. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What about salt?
Sure. So, yeah, I didn't say too much about salt. I'm so glad you asked that. So the average American eats 3 or 4 times the amount of sodium that they're supposed to. You really should have about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt to a full teaspoon of salt. The average American is having in their food, which is processed food. There's lots of sodium in processed foods, as well as they're adding at the table or even when they're prepping too much salt. So salt is okay, but you want to try to minimize it. I would recommend if you're cooking not to add any salt at all to your food when you're cooking it. And then you can add a little bit, and you're going to get a lot less and still get the taste of salt if you need it. And then you just work your way backwards and try to minimize that. Yes, ma'am.
So, do you use like Mrs. Dash instead of salt? Can you use this product to make your food taste better?
You can, absolutely. Yes, I use Mrs. Dash. You can also use salt, but I don't recommend putting too much salt in the food that you cook. I would say it's probably a yellow light as far as the food goes. A lot of people are like, no, high blood pressure, which I didn't talk about, which is also the silent killer. Obviously, sodium and excess sodium is pretty bad. So if you're going to eat this way and you minimize your salt, another reason why your blood pressure will drop. Yes, ma'am?
Healthy. Caffeine.
Caffeine, my opinion, I love caffeine. I love coffee. I have it every day. I honestly don't put animal-based cream in it. I just have my coffee black, but I might know some people that have plant-based cream that they put in their coffee. So yeah, that's my opinion and my knowledge based on what I've studied.
Sugar?
Yeah, sugar, so just in general with the presentation, you see how much sugar and calories that are in our food itself specifically. So I would say minimally, if you're going to put it in your coffee, I don't think it's the end of the world necessarily. I would minimize that. Also, your taste buds could adapt and change as well. I wouldn't say sugar is the death, but what can we do to minimize that? Because of the calories, the empty calories that are there with no nutritional value. Yes, sir?
Have you ever gone out to eat around here somewhere?
Good question, yes. We don't eat anymore in my family out. So, yeah, that's a great question. It is definitely a challenge. Actually, I had a video call last night with my team. That's one of the things that we do in my group is once a week we have a video call. And the topic was the challenges with eating out. And quite frankly, it's very difficult, not impossible, it's very difficult to eat everything above that line when you eat out. Because even when you tell the chef, please don't add any oil to it, they add lots of salt and then lots of oil to it. So we have in my family and in my company what we call cheat days. Not that we go crazy and have a bunch of chicken legs, but there may be some times where we enjoy ourselves and don't worry so much about it. Again, if you look at the scheme of things, the big picture, what you want to do is try to minimize those things as much as possible. So there are lots of tips and tricks that I could share later on with individuals for eating out.
What about other supplements, especially like for women, vitamin D?
Sure.
And those kind of things?
Yeah, so the two that I take every day pretty much for this lifestyle really is the vitamin B12 is the one I take. I don't take vitamin B12. I also in the sun, well in the summer I am, but nearly as much as I should be, especially in the winter, so 8 or 9 months a year. So I do take a vitamin D as well. But short of that, there's no other supplements that I recommend that you take.
Calcium?
No. You get so much calcium in the leafy vegetable spinach, in those foods. They're loaded with nutrients. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what about salmon? They always talk about it's a source of your omega-3s.
Sure.
So if you're on plant-based, where do you get your omega-3s?
Thank you for asking that. So again, salmon, in my opinion, animal products, they're a no, for a lot of reasons that we just talked about. For me, I grind up flaxseed, and I basically put flaxseed in that big bowl of oatmeal every day to get my omega-3s. Your omega-6s and your omega-3s, and the ratio of those is typically 1-to-1, but in all those processed foods, in America, the ratio is actually 16-to-1, which is bad. You want to try to minimize that as much as possible. So what I do is I grind up flaxseed and I add that to my oatmeal every day. I usually have 2 or 3 heaping tablespoons of ground up flaxseed. You have to grind the flaxseed though. What other questions? Yes, sir.
Fish in general, seafood.
Yep.
Where
So,
the fish is there?
yeah, it's an animal product, so it would be a no, but it's what you decide. I do have a wife that likes to have her seafood from time to time, which is great. But she's 80 to 90% plant-based when she does that as well. So, yeah, it's not very healthy. There's a tremendous amount, shrimp is a good example, there's a tremendous amount of cholesterol in those products, shrimp, crab, etc. Yes, ma'am?
Well, substitutes for milk, like oat milk and
Mhm.
yogurt made from things. that
Sure.
have milk, that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah, highly recommended. So we have usually soy milk or cashew milk, almond milk in my house. Plant-based milk is great, fantastic. Yes, ma'am?
Skim milk, all of that category?
If skim milk is not dairy, then it's fine. But if skim milk is dairy, let's just remove the fat. You still have a ton of saturated fats in that milk, then that would be a no. Okay? Thank you for asking. Yes, ma'am?
The almond milk comes sweetened and unsweetened, does it matter?
It does, just in the calories. So soy milk is very sweet, and some kids can't adapt to soy milk because it's so sweet. So regular milk, again, you can work your way backwards and just start having 50-50 and 75-25, but what you have more in the sweetened soy milk or almond milk is additional calories. If you can work your way to having none, I pretty much just have cashew milk, which milk is not sweet, right? So a lot of people like that extra sweetness with their cream as a creamer for their coffee as well. But the only difference is it's got some additional calories in there. Yes, ma'am?
You said that you have some cashew nuts and things like that at home, but when you eat a plant-based diet, how much do you even utilize those?
Not very much.
Yeah.
Me personally.
Yeah.
But my son has a lot of soy milk with his highly processed cereals and such. So, but you're right. Yeah, I usually have cashew milk. I do have it from time to time, but I don't drink very much cashew milk. So, yes, ma'am.
What's your advice on sweeteners, like stevia?
Yeah, stevia is one of the better, healthier ones, but the best is black molasses, believe it or not, or ground up dates with water to make a date paste. That's whole food plant-based and is incredibly sweet, incredibly healthy. But yeah, there's a lot of no-nos on the sweetener. Stevia is one of the better ones, but it's probably not as healthy as something like date paste. So sometimes when I'm doing baking, which isn't very often, but I'll have date paste in that cookie, oatmeal raisin cookie or what have you, and it definitely sweetens it up. Yes, ma'am?
What type of breads, can you have breads?
You can have breads, and that's like to his question about eating out, they're giving you bread all the time, and some of those breads, quite frankly, could have egg in them, or could have milk in it, I don't know. And I just basically, I don't go crazy with it, I'll have a piece or two, but the recommendation is to have a whole wheat-based bread, where your fiber content is significant. You can compare those fiber contents in a slice of bread specifically. So you definitely can have bread, but typically I'd recommend a whole wheat bread so you're getting a tremendous amount of fiber in there. Thank you for asking. Yes, ma'am?
Do you cook with whole wheat flour, like for muffins and cookies?
I do, but not very much. Yeah, because that's processed and that's ground up. And what happens is that's absorbed significantly in the small intestines versus the actual wheat itself, which is absorbed in the large intestine. So I do from time to time use those, and the only flour I have is the whole wheat flour, but it's pretty minimal, and sometimes it's maybe to thicken up a soup or a sauce. Yes, sir?
Where is wine, beer, and alcohol?
So I think for me, in fact, somebody here saw me at a bar recently and said, "What are you doing?" I'm living my life. And I wasn't drinking water, let's just say. So it's a personal decision. I don't want to tell you it's health food because I don't think it's health food, but I drink beer, I drink wine, not to say that you do or can or can't, but it is a plant, by the way, it is barley. I don't know that it's a health food, so just qualify that. So. Yeah, I'm getting all my fruits and vegetables today. What else you got?
You said you don't count calories. So how do you know how much you're supposed to be eating just so you're full?
Exactly. I just eat this food and I stop eating when I'm full. Typically, I don't gorge myself, although some of those meals, that pinto bean soup, I can't breathe when I'm done with that dinner typically. But I just eat it until I'm full, and usually that gets me by until lunch from my oatmeal, my pound and a half oatmeal in the morning.
I thought you're supposed to wait 20, your stomach doesn't register being full.
Right, 20 minutes or something.
later.
I might have read that, yeah. But I eat until I'm full. I don't go crazy with it, and that's that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I know the beans. Do you do dry beans? Do you
Yes.
do canned beans?
Yes, I do both.
Right, both.
Yeah, and I have an instant pot, so those dried beans, I don't have to soak them the night before. I clean the beans. I've got beans in 40 minutes. It takes about 10 minutes for it to heat up or get pressure on it. They cook for 30 minutes. You add a little seasoning in there. I don't add any salt in there, and it tastes amazing. But yeah, I do both that as well as the canned beans that I showed you guys earlier on the slide.
What about like tomatoes, if you're going to do marinara sauce, as long as they're canned without salt?
Low sodium, yeah, you don't have to get everything without salt, but I would recommend it. But some of the stuff I forget, I forgot to get low sodium or no salt. I just get the regular stuff as well. No counting calories. Yes, ma'am.
Pinto beans are one of his favorites as well. What, the seasonings, what do you put in there?
Yeah, so my pinto bean delight, that's going to cost a lot of money here. So all I do is I put water in the crock pot. I put pinto beans in, it's one of your,
I saw it.
okay, that's it. It's Uncle Joe's pinto bean delight. I put that in the crock pot water. I add just a little bit of salt in the morning. I put it on 8 hours to cook. At 7.5 hours, I've got sliced tomatoes, sliced cilantro, sliced onions, and a little bit of lime, and it cooks for 30 more minutes, and then it's done.
You put that in the beans?
I put it in the crock pot
With the beans?
with the beans. 30 minutes later, it's done. I've already cooked brown rice. I always have brown rice in my refrigerator cooked. I add a cup and a half of brown rice to that. It tastes amazing. No extra charge for that. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, there's some Success has there's a brand name called Success that you can have. Cups of brown rice. If it's brown rice versus white rice, the benefit is you're going to get twice as much fiber with the brown rice. White rice isn't horrible, but let's up the fiber we can. And I like the way brown rice tastes. I don't have an issue with brown rice. Some of my clients don't like it, but white rice is okay too, but brown rice is better. Yes, ma'am.
But you're not talking about instant brown rice. You're talking about the one
I'm talking about
cooked.
It can be instant.
It can be instant. She uses the instant stuff, but I typically will cook it. Also in the instant pot, 22 minutes, you've got brown rice. A little bit of onion powder, a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of pepper. 22 minutes, you're good to go. Yes, ma'am.
Are the strawberries and blueberries that you put in your oatmeal organic?
Great question. Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're not available. I'll spend a little bit more money on the organic, but I don't always buy organic. I wash it. It's probably not as, obviously, pesticide-free, etc. But I would say it's about 50-50. Yes, ma'am.
So you've said, many times that this food is yummy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the hardest things that I dealt with trying to get here was looking at my family or the people around
Sure.
me enjoying the things that I
Sure.
really wanted. And you want them like 10 times more badly when you're denying yourself of them.
Of course.
And then it doesn't come down to the fact that this is so yummy. It
Right.
just kind of, there is this period where
Sure.
it's just, why can't I have that?
Sure.
But I kind of just went through that, and like the lettuce salad, I don't eat dressing on my salad,
Okay.
and I never thought that I would get there.
Sure.
But if I throw strawberries or blueberries
There you
or
go.
cucumbers in a salad,
Yeah.
that eventually takes over.
Sure.
So is there anything that you can speak to about kind of the sugar cravings while you're trying to get to this?
Yeah, well, I can say a couple things. So I heard two things. I heard family and challenges with logistics with family, which is a very common challenge potentially. I do have a family. I'm very blessed to have 3 children. One of my children is about 70% plant-based. One of my children is about 50% because he eats what we cook that he likes. And the other one, I don't know that he knows what a plant is. So, you know, my wife and I pretty much eat this way, and we're fortunate that it's David at home now, and he basically eats what we cook. If he doesn't, he gets up and cooks some pasta and throws some tomato sauce on it or what have you. But that is a challenge. I don't want to make light of that because that potentially is a challenge itself specifically. And working through that, I would love to work with anybody that would like to work through that specifically. I think going back to the why, I'm going to answer the sweetness in just a minute. I think going back to the why, I think is the most compelling thing. You know, when Grace Ann got home on that Monday, December the 26th, 2016, and I said, I'm going to do this, she's like, wait a minute, this is a little dramatic. And I basically said, well, I feel like I'm going to die, and I've talked to you about this several times, and I really want to do this. So for the month of January, she and I both were plant-based, and then she stopped being plant-based. And then Lent rolls around a few weeks later, and she was back on. She goes, well, I'm going to do it for Lent, and then ever since then she's been plant-based. So it is a challenge if it's just you and the rest of the family necessarily, but I think if you go back to that why, what's really important to you, that can potentially help you a great deal. Obviously, the family members that care about you and love you, and you love them as well. As far as the sweetness goes, there's 2 caveats here. The first one is things like the strawberries and the blueberries are really helpful, but I've had clients that have had that sweetness crave that they really struggled with. And I worked and coached them through, so I have the ice cream that you saw. So I had a client that basically didn't have any sweets, but every day this client would make some ice cream at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it tastes just like ice cream. It's very sweet and it's very cold. And what that client was doing was basically taking care of the sweetness urge and making it that much more difficult for the craving. So I work with that individual to convert from the frozen bananas to every other day, let's go with regular bananas. And it's just a slow process. Within 2 weeks, that client didn't have a craving. Now, I'm not telling you that's the way it's going to be all the time, because it was the first time that I had dealt with it. Like I said, I've had 11, 12 clients so far. But there is a challenge there. The hardest thing you can do, but it's actually the most effective, is total abstinence, because you do get there, but it does take some time, especially with food addicts, which is a real thing and pretty common, unfortunately, especially with these businesses that are making these amazing tasting foods, but unfortunately are not very healthy. I hope I answered the question. All right. What other questions? Yes, sir.
You get some wild rice, they call it, in Minnesota, and it had black rice in it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better than brown, or is it what?
I don't know. I actually had that. I got some at Hy-Vee, and I love it. It tastes amazing. I'm assuming it's pretty comparable, but to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you 100% whether it's better or worse, but it tastes great. I love it. I've cooked it in Instant Pot as well. Yes, sir.
What about Morningstar products?
Morningstar products like the fake meats and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I think that's okay as a transition. In my opinion, you have to decide what makes sense for you. We still, this July 4th, we had Morningstar hot dogs. You know, they probably weren't as healthy as they could have been because they had a lot of oils in them. But the rest of my family and my family's friends had regular hot dogs. My wife and I had the plant-based hot dogs. So it's a nice transition food. It certainly isn't above that line. You want to strive to be as much as possible. But again, I think if you look at the scheme of things, this isn't about perfection. This is all about progress. What you can do to be as healthy as possible. Yes, sir.
Their corn dogs cooked in the oven taste just like John Moss.
Do they really? Yeah. So it's nice as a transition potentially, but it's not something I would say recommend. Like, let's have a corn dog every evening or every day for a snack necessarily. Yes, ma'am.
Plant-based meats is not really plants.
Yeah, it's actual plants that they've converted in the factories, and they've got a lot of oils, a lot of good tasting foods to it to make it taste and texture just like meats. Some of them, and I hear, I've not tried an Impossible Burger, and one day I will, I hear it is amazing. But there's a lot of oil and there's a lot of fat in there as well, so you just have to recognize that. Yes, ma'am, in the back. I did. Waffles and pancakes, go ahead.
Are they given names or not?
No, there's no animal products in any of that at all. Thank you for asking.
So where do you find that?
So there's lots of recipes. If you Google plant-based recipes waffles, you're going to find I would say probably 10 to 15 recipes on how to make that. All different kinds that have no animal products at all. Some of those don't taste very good, some of those taste amazing. Just have to kind of play around with it. Yes, ma'am? What about it? Well, it's high calories. I mean, it's sugar. I'm not telling you can't have it. It's not plant-based, right? It's from a bee, but there's a lot of sugar in there. But don't think, well, I'm going to have 4 tablespoons of honey with my coffee because it's not an animal product when it is, and there's a lot of calories there. But yes, ma'am.
What are some of the strategies if socially you're doing a lot of things and everywhere you go there's food and a lot of it is not very healthy?
Sure.
So how do
There's 3. Yeah, I think it's a great question.
Because it's a reality.
Yeah.
You go to a potluck, you might
Sure.
bring a healthy dish,
Sure.
but there's a lot of things that aren't healthy.
Absolutely. It's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for 2.5 years, and I have that challenge several times a month sometimes, right? So there's a number of different strategies. I'm just going to fire off a few of them. You eat beforehand. That's one. You bring your own food. That's another one. You abstain. You say, you know what, I'm not interested in this, or you can make up a lie or make up a reason on the church, sorry. Or whatever it is that for a reason that you don't want to have that specifically. A lot of your friends and family are going to kind of know that you're pursuing this lifestyle as well. Sometimes I've gone and had the lettuce and tomato in a bun for my meal and not the hamburger itself. You can skip the meal. There's a number of different things that you could do. Some of those aren't necessarily as convenient and probably as enjoyable. But again, if you just link back to what that big picture why is, that usually takes care of it for you. But it is a challenge, because especially July 4th week we had here, a lot of different activities. There's the potato chips, there's the etc. Or you cheat. You decide, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I don't recommend that, but there's a number of different things that you can do.
But socially, some people, even if you might be hurting their feelings by not eating things.
Sure.
They may not be on the same page with
Sure,
you.
of course.
Plant-based.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So there's just situations where you might have to walk. It's hard to walk a line.
It could be hard to walk that line, but if you have people that you generally care about and that generally care about you and that understand what you're trying to do to pursue the most health in your life, I would hope that they would respect those wishes. But it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. There's been definitely some where I've cheated, but I don't typically cheat. I just pretty much do what I do, and people know, and I'm incredibly respectful in that process. And I just make do, or I just won't eat it. So it's a good question. It's definitely a challenge. It could be a challenge. Yes, ma'am.
So what if you try, I would do this 50% of the time, do you still get benefit from doing the plant-based the other 50%?
You do. Let's say you're going to go from 11% to 50%.
Yeah, I want to eat a
Right.
hamburger one day a week.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna, if you just increase that number 11% to 15 to 45 to 65 to 70, you're going to benefit more because you're getting more plants in your diet. Definitely. Not so that you're not going to probably get the outcomes potentially that you want health-wise, because you really want to push the envelope in that. But you will definitely get benefit. Like I mentioned, just having a salad, just a small salad with your lunch and your dinner, that's going to be huge. Stop. There's one of the studies that I have where a health coach was coaching a woman that was very severely overweight. She was morbidly obese, and he couldn't get her to do anything. So, and she would, everything he came up with an idea or strategy, she wasn't going to do it. And she ended up losing 70 pounds because she did one thing, which was she started eating oatmeal in the morning. That's the only thing she decided to do. So her health probably wasn't great, but was significantly better because she did one thing differently. She started having oatmeal with fruit every morning. So, okay. Yes, ma'am.
So do you recommend steel cut over regular?
Yeah, so steel cut is amazing. I love the texture, incredibly healthy. I would say they're comparable as far as nutritional value. They're just not as convenient unless you make them and make a boatload as a batch. My oatmeal is rolled oats, the old-fashioned oats. I put a cup in a bowl, 2 cups of water, I throw it in the microwave in 3 minutes and it's made. Steel cut, as you're probably aware, takes about 20 to 25 minutes to cook. It tastes great. I love the texture, but it's just not as convenient. Yes, sir?
Is your presentation available?
It is not available. I'm working on setting it up. I'm recording this today.
It will be available.
And my technology manager here, who also happens to be my daughter, she comes at a good price. My plan is to make it available. There's a number of people throughout the country that are friends of mine that would want to be here but couldn't be here. So, yeah, you have my contact information. Hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have it up and running and I can send it to anybody that's interested. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you talked about this is going to help somebody who has heart disease.
Sure.
It's going to help someone who's obese.
Sure.
Etc.
Diabetes.
What about if you have an autoimmune disease?
Yes, there's so many things. So I don't want to get into all the other things, but there's so many things. There's Dean Ornish that I talked about. He's doing a study right now on the effects of Alzheimer's, and there's already preliminary reports saying that this could help and improve Alzheimer's. Not to say that it's going to cure Alzheimer's. I didn't say that. Not to say that you can reverse Alzheimer's. I didn't say that as well. But they are showing. Actually, I just bought a book called The Alzheimer's Solution that talks about lifestyle, the importance of lifestyle, the number one thing being what you put in your mouth is fuel, and how that can help with Alzheimer's. So autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, so many things. Erectile dysfunction. I mean, seriously, it's all in the vascular, it's all in the blood vessels. Significant amount of things that can happen in the body when you give yourself some pretty good fuel. The body heals itself. Yes, ma'am. Correct, here in town. Yes, thank you.
What about egg beaters?
Is it animal product?
Egg whites.
Yeah, if it's an animal product, it would be a no. Egg whites? Yes, so yeah, that would be a no. Thank you for asking. Yes, sir.
What about sweet potatoes?
Awesome. Sweet potatoes are great. So incredibly healthy. And regular white potatoes are great as well. You have a lot of people that say, oh my God, I was always told for years not to have potatoes. Have potatoes. Remember where they are in the calorie density chart, right? Have lots of potatoes. Just don't throw the sour cream and the butter and the bacon bits on them. You can throw the chives on them. Yes, ma'am.
My dad has kidney problems on top of his heart disease.
Sure.
If he has a diabetes and he has a page of vegetables he can't have.
Sure.
That related to the kidney issue.
Sure. So I don't know about your dad specific, and I'm not a physician or a doctor. I would recommend that he follows his doctor's orders. But I can tell you that eating this way in general is the most healthy way that you can eat. Okay? So there's conflicting information. You know, one of the reasons I was so excited to talk today is because, again, 3 years ago I didn't know this. They don't teach nutrition in med school in general. You get 4 or 6 hours over the course of 4 years of med school. So many doctors don't know about this necessarily, but I feel like we're in the precipice of something that's going to be pretty exciting that's going on where people are going to be more healthy because of this knowledge and information. Yes, ma'am.
You know, my mom has a lot of problems with reflux and things like that. And I was just telling my husband the other day, she's the first to say, you know, I can't have oranges, I can't have this, I can't have that. But like your father, I mean, if you could concentrate on the things that you are able to have and make your focus on your diet be that,
Sure.
don't you
Absolutely.
think that you'd get somewhere and then maybe as things got better, you could add in those things that are on your list? But
There's thousands of things that you can eat in this plan. A lot of people feel like, again, it was all about lettuce in the beginning for me. There's so much that there's to offer. What you can eat, focus on that. What you like to eat, focus on that. That's above the line. Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts about food with probiotics?
I couldn't hear you.
Food with probiotics in
Probiotics? Yeah, so there's a lot of study and a lot of data with probiotics in the microbiome, which is the bacteria. There's 20 trillion cells of bacteria that are in your body. So I don't know specifically about food that has probiotics in it. I do know some people that will take the probiotics. I don't think it's necessary, but it might help with the transition because your microbiome is changing, which is why I was having so much challenge with lettuce in the beginning with all that fiber. My body was going, what are you doing? What are you doing to me? And it was a little difficult for a while. But yes, ma'am.
Do you talk about like it was so likely for blood tests, you know, B12 or meat?
Sure. Me specifically? Yes, I do. I have an annual physical, and those numbers I gave you about my cholesterol, which started at 173 to 161 to 139 to 128. That's in the last 2.5 years. I've also run a B12. What's that?
Annual would be sufficient for.
I couldn't hear you.
An annual follow-up B12 would be sufficient
I think so, yes. If you're taking the B12, you're going to be fine anyway, but an annual follow-up, they test for that as well. And I've got more than enough B12 on my body. Yes, thank you for asking. What other questions you got? You good? So you guys have all my information, all my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if I can help you anyway. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.